Every school in New Zealand is facing the challenge of how to go about managing the design and the implementation of the revised curriculum. Some are much further down on the journey than others, some are being more cautious, some are keen to get it done. Well, we need to weigh up and think about our approaches and what their long-term impact and benefits might be. I referred to the stages that schools are working through on the revised curriculum as a phaseology of the New Zealand curriculum. The first phase seems to be one of just becoming generally familiar with what this curriculum is about, what its dimensions are, and what the obligations are for a school. It does represent some quite significant shifts to what we've been used to over the last 10 or 15 years. The second phase is digging more deeply into the different dimensions, exploring what they mean for practice in the school. And the third phase, which is probably going to be the greatest challenge of all, is how to bring it all together into a coherent whole for the school. Singy says that for a school to be effective, well, he refers to organisations generally, they need to be learning organisations, not just places where we say the learning is for students, but places where everybody is engaged in learning. And that is a central concept that sits within this revised national curriculum. Singy says a learning place is one where people create the results that they truly desire. Well, there is a good challenge for a school. What are the results that you truly desire? Do they fall off the lips of everybody around your school? Or is it somewhere stated in some document? Singy says that a learning organisation is a place where new and expansive patterns of thinking are nurtured. I mean, Singy says these things in such easy language, and yet behind each of these statements is a very profound challenge. If these challenges are taken up in our approaches to curriculum, I think that we can be quite confident that we're on the right track. So is your school a place where collective aspiration is set free? That sounds quite lyrical, but what is your collective aspiration? What do you want for your students? Is it able to happen in your school, or is it overly constrained by system thinking? Or is it enabled by risk-taking, exploration, doing what you believe, doing what you think is actually going to help and benefit your students? Moreover, he says that an effective learning organisation is one where people learn together. There are, in effect, some key processes that schools need to work through in managing the implementation of their curriculum. And I've depicted these as a steering wheel. And leaders need to have their hands on that steering wheel with the confidence that they're driving in a good direction for their school and for their learners. The first part of this wheel says clarifications. In other words, what does this curriculum mean? And moreover, what does it mean for us and for our practice? It's about explorations, not just taking on a new package or saying we'll do it this way, but saying, well, let's develop a set of criteria or principles for an approach that we would like to follow, then design some practice that will actually uphold those or subscribe to those approaches. Exploring them means giving it a go, then critically reviewing how it went, and not just biffing it out if it didn't happen to go well, but saying, what can we do to strengthen our approach? So it's an ongoing process of learning and modification and review. At the end of the day, you do need to make decisions, but all good decisions should always be subject to ongoing review. Review, literally meaning again, view meaning look. Look again at our practice. If we're to be a dynamic learning institution, review will be at the heart of our approaches. We might ask also, in managing implementation, what are the opportunities and what are the obligations? Well, there's no question but that this curriculum does provide schools with lots of opportunities. Arguably, it is one of the most liberal curriculum documents in the Western world. It is not highly prescriptive. Now, if you want a highly prescriptive curriculum that tells you what to do and when to do it, probably the best thing is to move to another country. But that's not our approach in Aotearoa, New Zealand. What are the actual obligations that this curriculum requires of schools? They are clearly set out on page 44 of the document. And I would argue that every curriculum leader needs to have these requirements on the tip of their tongues. When you can do that, you've got the power of practice. The first requirement concerns the principles. It says that your curriculum will be underpinned by and consistent with the principles. We're going to come to each of these dimensions in turn in the various chapters of this resource. In respect to the values, your legal obligation, as set out on page 44, is to encourage, support and model the values. The key competencies. What is required of our school? Well, the requirement is very clear, very uncomplicated. The requirement is to support students to develop the key competencies. Nothing more, nothing less. That is the requirement. Nothing there about assessment, nothing there about reporting, nothing about what the constituent parts of the competencies will be. There's a great deal of scope there and a great deal of opportunity for you to actually tailor those competencies to the priority needs for your children. This curriculum has got very important statements on each of the learning areas. These learning area statements should be the drivers for your thinking about what it is that you're attempting in each of those areas. Now, with the current documents that are to be replaced, we worked to achievement objectives, a very fragmented view of what a learning area is all about. Well, the status of the achievement objectives is changing in that now schools are told that you can select achievement objectives according to the needs and the learning priorities for your students. But above all, your learning area programs will be developed and will focus on the learning area statements. That's where you take your direction from, not from endless little lists of achievement objectives. It's the big view we're wanting, not the little picture view. In managing implementation, we also need to have a good appreciation of our roles and our responsibilities, bearing in mind that New Zealand schools operate in a self-management system with boards of trustees having the final level, ultimate legal responsibility for what happens in a school. I've prepared some expectations of the board and expectations of the principal and the staff, which I presented to a School Trustees Association conference in Wellington. I was interested to get their response to see whether in fact they would be validated, and I have to say they were very, very strongly and warmly received. So when you look at the statements of what a board can expect of the principal and staff, or what the principal and staff can expect of the board, what you find is we've got reciprocal statements. Each represents the flip side of the other. It begins with having an open, trusting, working partnership. Now, in some schools and with some boards, that's an easy matter. It's uncomplicated, it works so well. In other schools, that's a challenge. But unless we get that part right, somehow our processes of curriculum implementation and our practice in our schools is going to be frustrated. We need to have a big picture focus. Move right away from jargon. There's nothing particularly smart about jargon. Use less paper. Move away from the reams that ply through our photocopiers. Get down to the big picture view of what's really important. And above all, there has to be this ongoing commitment to professional learning. If we don't invest in teacher professional learning at every stage, then at every point our advancement is jeopardised. I've heard a number of schools say we'll need to think about how we are going to consult with our community on the revised curriculum. Well, we're offering some suggestions here to help schools understand the nature of how you do interrelate with your community on matters regarding the school curriculum. Now, at one level, it's important to actually inform, give parents information. And we all know from experience that not every parent wants to take up that information, or they'll read the information in the way that they want to read it. But nonetheless, we are obligated to provide information to our communities about what's happening in our schools and what our directions are. And in doing that, to welcome feedback. Consultation is an interesting word. It has sort of got statutory undertones or overtones. Schools are legally obligated to consult with their communities on three matters: whenever they revise their charter, their health curriculum, and in setting annual targets for Māori students. There's no legal requirement anywhere on consultation about the New Zealand curriculum in general. Just go back to an earlier statement about the 4-point direction of this curriculum. And the 4th point was community engagement. Engagement is the key word, not consultation. How are we going to engage those who have the greatest influence on the learner? And arguably, those who have the greatest influence on the learner are going to be the teacher, the children's friends and peers, and most importantly, their parents, their whānau, and the significant people in their lives.